Hello, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you for joining today's webinar with Lepide. We appreciate you all being here. And the first thing I'd like to do is take a second to introduce our speakers today. My name is Russ Savvy with Gimel, and we are pleased to have our key speakers today from Lepide, Josh and Danny. You guys want to take a second to introduce yourselves?
Yeah, thanks, Russ, so much. And good day and good evening, everyone, wherever you are in the world. My name is Josh Van Cott, Vice President of Sales and Operations of North America for Lepide. Thank you so much for your time and interest today.
Yeah, hi everyone, it's Danny. As you can tell by my accent, I'm from the UK. I'm the head of technical delivery. It's my responsibility within Lepide to head up the support and product itself. So yeah, it's great to be here.
Great, thanks guys. And before we get started, I'd like to go through a few housekeeping items. We will have a live QA after today's session, so please feel free to submit questions throughout the webinar. And at the end, we'll answer as many questions as we can. If you have any technical difficulties, please send us a message and let us know so we can help you solve any issues you might be having. So to kick things off, I just have a few slides here to tell you a little bit about Gimel. Gimel is a records information management and governance software company that was founded in 2002. We have a client success team and global network of partners that have been delivering solutions with us for more than 17 years. Our primary technology partners are Microsoft and SAP. Our implementation partners include small specialty SIs with specific areas of expertise, as well as large global SIs and consultants like PwC and Lockheed Martin. And with over 500,000 licensed users and growing, we have a strong community of who we consider some of the best clients in the world. Now, let's dive a little deep into the problem that Gimel software solves. The reason Gimel exists is because so many enterprises struggle to manage the sheer volume of information and systems they have. For years, they have been adding business applications and information, but they haven't been able to create a consistent way to manage the lifecycle of their information across these systems and dispose of unneeded or outdated information. This makes doing business more difficult, less secure, and less compliant. Gimel's family of software products work together to let you create an efficient digital workplace. Our comprehensive software products include records management, content governance for SharePoint, and document management for SAP. Gimel's content governance solves the first hurdle in records management process by automating the classification and organization of newly uploaded content and then storing the content in its proper location within SharePoint and Office 365. Gimel's document management for SAP solutions easily connects SAP and SharePoint content, data, and processes, putting critical business information right where people work. And finally, Gimel's records management solution offers seamless integration to manage your information within all of your repositories, not just SharePoint and Office 365, but also file shares, Box, FileNet, Documentum, to name a few. It manages your content sources consistently from a single dashboard and with a central file plan builder that ensures that your organization's most valuable information is managed properly and with a correct retention schedule. Gimel's records management will give your organization a unified view and access point to your entire information inventory. But now, without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to our speakers from Lepide to go over their solution that they bring today.
All right, thank you for that, Russ. Okay. All right. Okay, team. So just a little bit about Lepide. We've been doing this for a long time. We started in the early 2000s as kernel data recovery, and then we formally launched Lepide in 2015. We have a ton of satisfied customers. We have about 100 employees, and our CEO is Mr. Aiden Simister. So I wanted to include this chart because it's really validation from Gartner that today's security solutions need to be data-centric to combat today's threats. What we're seeing is that roughly 60% of organizations don't have any insight to interactions with sensitive data, and really only 5% of organizations have a data-centric approach to security. However, Gartner claims this is a huge growth market in the coming years. Okay, so when you think about sensitive data, whether it's sensitive unstructured data, audit data, every organization has to deal with data sprawl, regulation, and really securing and managing this sensitive data, this is exactly where Lepide is focused. So we're providing visibility into unstructured data at rest, as well as audit data, really again focusing on these core use cases of data protection, as well as supporting compliance and regulation. So to support these capabilities, we're focusing on 3 primary capabilities. So this first capability is prevention. So we're focusing on access governance, and Lepide can help support any type of access models, starting with really that whole least privilege model, and then supporting initiatives like zero trust. We do offer a free risk analysis. We can talk about that later, but essentially it's an install and configuration of Lepide, and we can provide meaningful results to help kind of spot those gaps in security, and then kind of build out your remediation and overall battle plan and securing your environment. So we can talk more about that later, but the next capability is detection. So really having that ability to mitigate any type of incidents, whether it's some type of attack, some form of an APT, and providing all the metadata you would expect to support any type of forensic investigation, as well as the compliance piece. And then lastly is response. So helping SecOps really manage your syslog data and acting as a proxy to SIEM environments to ultimately reduce response times and produce those high fidelity alerts. Okay, so the data stores we support, so both flavors of Active Directory on-prem as well as in the cloud. Your file servers, right? Your most sensitive unstructured data that's out there, we absolutely support that. All the flavors of Exchange and SharePoint, as well as SQL Server, as well as O365. We do have a capability to audit any cloud instance. So we would connect by API, and assuming we can make that connection, we can audit really environment in the cloud, as well as network devices. Okay, so I think it's important to note here that the Lepide Data Security Platform has been developed on it aggressively over the last several years. We have all the original capabilities, we just added on. So from our perspective, everything in our world kind of starts with the thorough discovery and classification of the stores that are supported in the previous slide. So if the overall solution is comprised of these 4 pillars, the first one here is focusing on this discovery and classification piece, which is really kind of the core to our data-centric audit and protection strategy. And our offering helps organizations with this strategy. The industry and analysts refer to it as DCAP. It's actually a term that's defined by Gartner. It's not just something we made up, but it's the category where Lepide is often most associated with by the analyst community. Okay, so we are thoroughly doing a discovery, we're persistently tagging data, and then we're helping to use that information to categorize and associate and assess risk. The next major category is access governance. So, you think of all that sensitive data and helping understand, what the classifications are, and then understanding why it's sensitive. But, getting past that piece, we move on to really understanding really what the context of that information looks like. So the Lepide Data Security Platform also does a full read of Active Directory. This means we're looking at who has access to your data. If they do have access, how are they getting it? If they do have access, are those levels appropriate? Should they even have access to the data? Do they have excessive privileges? So we're using this visibility and that information to support least privilege and zero trust models. And then if we understand who has access, what level of access they have, where they got the permissions from, we can understand how users are interacting with the data. So are they moving data? Are they deleting it? Are they copying it? Are they creating new sensitive data? Are they doing anything that's unusual? That moves us on to this next pillar, which is our capability around the user and entity behavior analytics. So what we're now doing is we're automatically learning that user behavior. So this is based on previous behavior over a given period of time, so we can see if they're doing anything unusual. So for example, if someone may be accessing sensitive data they don't usually access from a strange location, a strange point in time, maybe 12 midnight from a random location, we're focusing on that anomaly detection, and automating that understanding is a huge piece of our solution. So we can alert you when these anomalies take place as well, but really understanding what the users are doing and how they're interacting with the data is a core capability of Lepide. Okay, and then finally, states and changes. So these are the pieces that are actually giving access to the data. So for example, Active Directory security group membership changes, we want to understand what types of changes are taking place around these systems that are actually governing access to the network, and then more importantly, to the unstructured sensitive data. So with the Lepide Data Security Platform, we'll be able to help support risk reduction initiatives, compliance initiatives, and also help support investigation against any associated risk that could come up. Okay, so Lepide has been developed on aggressively, as I previously mentioned. We are actually doing a major release about once a quarter, and with dot releases throughout the quarter. So in our most recent release of version 19.4, we added 4 new capabilities. So the first here are these threat models. So they're predefined templates that'll help identify certain threats. So any type of ransomware, brute force attacks, etc. We have a full list of these threat models if you want to see them on our website. But the thing to note here is that it's quick time to value. So as these attacks have certain type of characteristics, we've gathered all those characteristics and made it quick to understand what they are to help you with investigations and support remediation efforts. This is a really cool one. So our risk analysis dashboard. So this is a brand new dashboard that summarizes the risk of any type of data systems that would be in scope. So things like admin users, failed access attempts, critical alerts, files by types, any type of specific classifications that you're looking for, any type of anomaly detected. All the things that executives would quickly want to understand are now embedded in the product. It's not a manual effort, assuming the scans have already been done. All you got to do is click on the risk analysis tab and it'll give you that information. Okay, and then we also added classification for SharePoint. So SharePoint Online, and really just trying to provide not only the context there, but the content as well to give you that understanding of what you have and what users are doing with everything on SharePoint. And then finally is the syslog data. So we are using this syslog that is really enabling us to plug into things like VMware, EMC storage, network devices, and really anything else that uses syslog. And we're pulling that information from those platforms into the Lepide Data Security Platform to save you having to go use scripts to extract a lot of that information. So what we're trying to do is broaden the value of Lepide and then increase that cross-platform functionality as well, again designed to deliver comprehensive, very significant value in a very short window. Okay, so I mentioned this previously. Lepide offers a free risk analysis. Again, it's a complimentary service that provides really an overview of the high, medium, and low areas of risk for any given environment. So great news about Lepide, it'll install in 10 minutes as long as the prerequisites are done. So the install is really quick. We just need a little bit of time to configure the environments that would be in scope, kick off the file walk, and then essentially be able to take just a few days to report on the events that have happened in those environments. And then basically from there, we can figure out what's most important, where we can basically have a starting point of any type of remediation efforts and battle plan of how we can strengthen the environment, harden AD, and help support any type of investigations. Great offering. A lot of consultants out there charge a significant rate for this. It's a free service with Lepide. I wanted to include this because so many times people ask, all right, well, what does it look like to get Lepide stood up? Great news is that it's very lightweight. So we need an app server, we need a SQL instance on the back end, we'll need our back controls for the console. And then this is really cool. The guys have developed a mobile app. So we support both iOS and Android OSs. So if you want to get alerts or get access into your Lepide environment from your mobile device, you can absolutely do that. And then we also support a split agent architecture along with all the load balancing options you'd expect to be there. And then finally, as I mentioned previously, we're also capturing that syslog data. So now we can act as a proxy to SIEM, really to produce those high fidelity alerts. Okay, so for the most part, that's the overview of the company, the product at a high level. What I'd like to do now is transition over to Danny, and we'll show you how easy all this is to use and how all of it works within the Lepide Data Security platform.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot for that, Josh. Fantastic. So hopefully you should all see on the screen now the latest edition of Lepide Data Security Platform. This is version 19.4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the solution and really base this walkthrough on the on that 4-pillar chart that we saw earlier. And walk through the various areas and explain how this all ties together in this platform. So we're starting off with those dashboards. The dashboard that we're looking at here is our Access Governance Insights dashboard, and this gives us a holistic view of what's going on, mostly around your data, but also again with those systems that surround and control access to the data. So everything that we're looking at is live as well. These dashboards are live. What we're representing with these tiles across the top is interactions with the data, maybe data being copied, understanding files and files that are modified, how many files we have classified, so the number of sensitive items we have within our unstructured data. And then things such as security group modifications, understanding who's being added and removed to these security groups, maybe understanding the permission changes, not only on our unstructured data on our file servers, but in mailboxes as well, understanding those permission changes to those mailboxes. It's reflective of what's happening as and when it's actually happening as well. As I said, this is all live. And because the dashboards are live as well, we can pump those alerts as we've got proactive threat detection in the solution. We can pump those alerts directly into this live feed, as you can see here. The whole dashboard is interactive as well, so we can drill into all of these sections to find out more information about, who may be copying those files, where they were copied from, if they were sensitive, and we're going to walk through, some of those kind of key reports as we go through the solution. We've got graphical representations that you can see. Maybe you want to understand or get a better representation of surges in activity. So maybe failed logins could potentially signify brute force attack, failed access attempts, common characteristic of a ransomware attack. We'll talk more about that in a few moments. And then some kind of state information. As Josh mentioned, we've got this risk analysis dashboard now, which gives you potential areas of risk at a high level view, so we can save this dashboard at any point in time if we wanted to present it back to the business. But what we should be seeing here are specific trends to provide information and ultimately proof that we've highlighted and identified the particular risks within our organization, and we're working at reducing those risks as well. We've also got specific dashboards for specific platforms if we want to get a deeper understanding as to what's going on across our domain, maybe specifically just for our file servers, maybe SharePoint, or a complete overview, a 360 view as we call it, of all of the changes within the environment that we have this stood up to monitor. So I'm going to navigate through the solution from this sidebar. I'm going to start with permissions and privileges. Now, as we walk through the solution, we will see a lot of reports and functionality that's available to you. We've tried to make this as intuitive and easy to use as possible. As I said, I'm going to pull out some of those kind of key reports to walk through that data-centric strategy as defined by Gartner, but really kind of show you what the solutions are able to do to help you with particular areas of risk and to help you with security. So The first report I want to look at is excessive permissions by object. So what I've done here is I've selected one of my file servers and a particular share on that file server. And then over in the bottom right hand corner, you can see the content of that particular folder. So we can see the objects that are within that folder. Because we have data discovery and classification enabled in this lab, we're actually scanning the files for what's actually inside there, really digging into the files to find out what sensitive information they hold. So we picked up credit card numbers, visa numbers, UK mobile numbers, social security numbers, US bank account numbers, a whole heap of sensitive information in this environment. And then what we're looking at is the list of users to the left-hand side. So we can see a list of our users within our environment, their effective permissions. So we can see all these users have got full control, so full access to all of this sensitive data. And then we can see a combination of blue ticks and red ticks. Now, remember a moment ago we said we'd set a threshold of 300 days. So what this is doing is it's actually looking at the user's activity over the last 300 days to identify what they've done. Now, a red tick would indicate that they haven't done anything within this directory based upon what we've reviewed. And a blue tick would indicate that they've actually used some or all of those permissions that make up the effective permission full control. But what you'll notice is we've got a bunch of users here from James down to Dave, complete block of red ticks. And what this is indicating to us is that in the last 300 days, essentially all of these users haven't done anything. They haven't interacted with this data at all. So it doesn't really make any sense for them to have an effective permission of full control. It's unnecessary. So what we're doing is we're using this information to start to adopt what we would call a least privilege model around the data. It's one that using this visibility to ensure that we have the correct and adequate security controls around our most sensitive data. And this is where these kind of pieces really come into play when they're not separate from one another, because we can get that context. We can understand with data discovery and classification how sensitive this data actually is. And by using this information to understand who shouldn't have access to it, we are limiting who can actually access the data. So this is going to help us in a number of different ways, but I think more obviously, making sure that if they don't have access to the data, if any of these accounts become compromised or misused, they're not going to be able to access stuff that they shouldn't have access to. The next question is typically, well, now I understand who's got access and who shouldn't have access. How can I identify how they're being granted access to the information? So we go to our permissions analysis section, permissions by object in this case. You can see we're looking at the exact same directory. We can see the content of that directory, again, showing us all of that information about the content of the files. We've got a list of users and their effective permissions. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to drill into a specific user to find out how he's getting access. If I expand this column here, we can see, again, effective permission full control, but he's getting it from a number of different places. He's getting it directly applied and indirectly applied through security group membership in Active Directory. From this view, I can also expand the security group. So I'm going to take this accounts security group. Within here, I can see a list of the other users. I can see a nested security group in here also, and I can see the users within that nested security group. So again, we use this visibility to make better decisions. By understanding how the access is being granted, we can ensure that we fully revoke access if the user no longer needs access. We can see that if we were to remove a security group from access from that directory, who else would then not have access? And we can also view all of the other users in there, and we can really kind of move around the solution to get a kind of a much deeper and better understanding of how our users are being granted access to our most sensitive data. So that's a couple of examples of how we can use this solution to for visibility to start adopting least privilege model. So with that in line, if I move to another tab now, our user and entity behavior analytics, we're going to take a look at what it looks like, how the solution presents user interactions with the data as well. So the first report I've pulled up here is under our file server monitoring. So we're looking at all modifications across our Windows file servers. Once again, all of these reports that we're looking at are out of the box. So you don't need to configure any of these reports. As Josh mentions, it only takes 10, 20 minutes to get the solution stood up. Once the solution's running and collecting all this information, you can start using these reports right away. So it's pretty straightforward. What you're looking at here is what we refer to as data normalization. So we present this information in a humanly readable format. So if we pick any one of these changes here, let's just say this modification, we can see under the operation column, file was modified. We can see who made the modification, at what date and time, the file name, the file path, and of course, what the file actually contains. Now, because we've structured this data in such a way that we can relate to it, in fact, we can filter this data as well. So we can answer very specific questions. Let's just say I want to see any files that have been copied that contain credit card information in the finance directory, maybe by a specific user, maybe even a particular file name. So we can get a deeper understanding of how our users are interacting with the data. This is just one example, but then we can really hold users accountable for their actions. If we see any activity that looks a bit suspicious, we can act upon it as we see fit. We can also re-educate our users in how they're interacting with the data in order to improve security within the organization as well. All the reports work in much the same way as well. So, you know, we're looking at file and folder interactions. Maybe we want to look at Active Directory security group modifications or any modifications in AD. So we select the report we're interested in running. We can select filters before we run the report as well. It's probably worth mentioning. So I want to see all changes for the previous month in Active Directory. And then I'm just going to run the report. And then it presents us with that information. Once again, who, what, when, and where, and the details were applicable. So in this case, the account security group was modified by Jill at this date and time. A member was added. We can see the user that was actually added in that security group. We can also bring all of this together as well. So if we wanted to run an investigation on an individual user, maybe in this example actually that I'm going to show you could be behavior of a rogue admin, shall we say. So we're looking at the admin accessing a load of network documentation. You know, we can see server lists, server configuration, subnet VLANs, that kind of thing. They've all got this administrator in this example, legitimate access to all of these areas. They're a domain admin, of course, but you know, are they using their permissions responsibly, or are they doing anything that they shouldn't be doing? We can see that they've enabled an external contractor account. They've reset the password. They've added it to domain admins. They've made some changes to a specific group policy setting, in this case allowing logon through terminal services, and they've added that user with those logon rights. So this may be suspicious, it may not. To me, in this example, it looks like they could be creating a backdoor into the network. It's very, very strange why you'd want to add an external contractor account to a domain admin and then give them logon rights. Very, very peculiar. So this is obviously after the fact. We can create alerts on any type of activity as well. So, you know, some of those kind of one-time key alerts that you may want to configure immediately, and the type of alerts we recommend enabling when we run that risk analysis. After we run the risk analysis, based upon potential areas of risk we may find in your organization, we'll make recommendations of the types of security controls and alerts that you should configure within the solution to help you with those, help you reduce that risk. So you could, if we go to group reports as an example, maybe administrative group modifications, right click, set an alert for that. That would be a typical alert that we would want to configure kind of straight off the bat. If we're talking about our data, identifying the areas that contain the most sensitive data and then setting an alert to be configured to let us know when files are being copied from that specific location. Maybe we could identify some open shares. Obviously, if we do identify open shares, those are the first places we're going to want to set proactive alerting around to make sure, you know, if any sensitive information gets copied into an open share, we're going to want to know about it immediately. So we can also do that as well. While we're talking about the alerts, what we also have built into the solution, this is new in the latest release, we've got these built-in threat models or threat signatures. The way that these work is we understand common characteristics of particular threat types. So these are kind of one-click enablement to help you identify potential areas of risk. So ransomware attack is quite a simple one to explain. So the characteristics of a ransomware attack, we're looking at a large number of failed reads and a large number of files renamed in a short period of time. So we'd set a threshold on that alert to send us a single alert. In fact, I'll show you how we could configure that manually in here. So look for those characteristics. Obviously, we don't need to do this now. The threat model is built into the solution. But if we were to do it manually, we're looking for, what did I say, failed reads, set the alert. And we're also looking for file renames. We would then want to set a threshold on that. Let's just say 50 in 1 minute, either of those activities. And then we can be alerted on that. So whether it's via email, sent into the live feed in the dashboards, send these alerts to our mobile app, maybe on our, we support both iOS and Android. Something else that's quite interesting is we can provide a response. So we have incident response built into the solution as well. So we can do this by means of script execution. And a typical way that we see our existing customers using this mechanism for a ransomware attack would be to understand the specific user account that's been hijacked. And then using a script to identify, when we identify those characteristics, using a script to disable that user account. So it's going to stop or limit the damage that the ransomware attack is going to do as soon as we understand or identify those characteristics, common characteristics of a ransomware attack. It's also worth noting as well that we can schedule all of these reports. So we highly encourage organizations to use this information to run in their regular or periodic change control processes. So just ensuring that there are no changes being made that are not that have not been authorized. If they have, why did they happen? And kind of how can we prevent those types of changes, if we need to prevent them from happening again? And the next thing we want to kind of do with the solution with regards to that whole data-centric strategy, one of the kind of the final pillars was around the systems and states. So we want to get a good understanding of what our systems look like. We looked at obviously system type changes in Active Directory, but one of the kind of common data points within our risk analysis, or an example of one of those data points, would be inactive users. It's quite often overlooked, but essentially these are users that are enabled but are no longer authenticating to the network. They're a legitimate access point into the network if those credentials become compromised. If they're not being used, they're not authenticating anymore, why do they need to be enabled? So we can get a good understanding of those. Even within our solution, we can automate the security around those inactive accounts, so we can rotate the passwords, we can disable the accounts, we can archive the accounts, we can even delete the accounts after a certain period of inactivity as well. So that's one of those key reports around systems and states, and we see that kind of widely adopted through organizations that are using the Lepide Data Security platform. Another one might be understanding a total number of users that have administrative privileges. But more importantly, when we dive into this, understanding how they're getting privileges. So it's quite easy to identify users that are directly a member of domain admins, these built-in administrative security groups. But here's an example of a user that's getting domain admin rights through a nested security group. And if we dive in a little bit deeper, we can see that this guy's a member of Sec3, which is nested in Sec2, which is nested in Sec1, which is ultimately all within domain admins. So it may not be so obvious, especially in the larger organizations that we work with, where, you know, the Active Directory structure has been in place for some time. We've got security group and permission sprawl through the AD. So it's going to help you to decipher and understand how these users are getting excessive privileges and whether they actually need to have those privileges. A couple of other key reports, maybe understanding accounts that have got ridiculously old passwords. So we can run reports on variable reports on accounts with passwords older than, in this case, 90 days. We've seen some organizations, and especially around service accounts, this is a real big problem for a lot of kind of, I'd say, all size organizations. You know, if you don't know what that service account is being used for, or where it's being used, and you do know that it's critical for that service account to remain open and no issues with that service account, and you know, sometimes you just don't reset the passwords on these because you don't know what it's going to break. So we can help you identify those accounts within your organization as well, figure out the age of those accounts, and give you a bit more insight into potential areas of risk based upon the age of passwords. Now, going back to user behavior, I think one of the pieces I wanted to really end on in this demonstration today was our anomaly detection. So this kind of takes it one step further. We looked at identifying characteristics by volume. But what this piece helps us to do is to identify what we would call single point anomalies. So this looks at previous user behavior and defines or learns and creates a baseline for every user within your organization. So based upon what we know they usually do, you know, and I'm sorry, and this time frame can be defined as long as you want it to be. So it could be a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. But ultimately, the longer you leave this mechanism to learn, the more accurate the anomalies are obviously going to be. So based upon the learned behavior of the user, when they do something that's maybe out of character or out of the norm as we've learned it, this solution is going to send you an alert and let you know that a user might be doing something unusual. So maybe they're legitimately accessing a location that they have access to that the solution hasn't seen them access in the past. Maybe they're logging on at a different point of time in the day to what they usually do. Maybe it's outside of business hours. We do have reporting around activity outside of business hours in the solution, but in this case, if it's just once and the user's never done that before, we're going to send you an alert on that. Maybe they're copying a load of data that we've never actually seen them copy before. We're going to send you an alert on that. And that's exactly what happened in this particular anomaly that I'm talking about. We've seen that the user Gemma has copied 8 files from a specific location at a particular point in time. We can see that it says this activity has never been seen before. So this is our kind of introduction into machine learning and understanding in an automated way user behavior and the differences between what they're doing now and what we've seen them do in the past. So yeah, kind of coming back to the dashboards then, I guess I think for the purpose of this demonstration today and covering off that data-centric audit and protection strategy and really giving you an overview of how the Lepide Data Security platform pulls all of these individual, normally individual pieces together into one easy-to-use solution. So I hope that was useful. What I'm going to do now is pass you back to Josh and the rest of the guys to wrap things up, and then I think we're good for time as well, so we can looks like we've probably got time for some questions at the end of the webinar too. So back to you, Josh.
Yeah, thank you so much, Danny. Nice job. So let me see here. I don't see any questions.
I have a few there coming up here. I can go ahead and jump in and ask some of those questions if we want to jump on and answer those.
Yeah, sure.
few questions here as far as how do I get started? Where can I download the software from? And do you offer free trials?
Yes, absolutely. So the trials are going to be considered engagements with Lepide. So what we would ask is if there is interest, just drop us an email. It's sales@lepide.com. That'll come to us. Let us know kind of where you found us, and if it's going to be an engagement with Gimel, we need to understand that. But yeah, anybody that wants to try Lepide and wants to take a look at what it can do, just drop us an email, and you absolutely can do that.
Great. How is your software licensed?
It is licensed by user. So we're essentially auditing and licensing really anybody that you want to manage data for, and that's including service accounts. So we would need to understand total users to include service accounts. Of course, there would be a break for the service accounts, but essentially it's a flat rate. So we just need to understand those two components. There is a starter pack that we include with all of our engagements. It's all the training that folks would need to be successful with Lepide. That's pretty much it.
Great. Another question, do you have anything to help with CCPA compliance?
Yeah, so we're building out framework and compliance support all the time. There is a framework right now inside Lepide for CCPA. It's continuing to get built out. But yeah, GDPR, CCPA, the main compliances, the main things that need to be supported from an audit and regulation perspective, you can absolutely do with Lepide.
Great, and I have one more question. Do you provide support for installation and configuration?
Yeah. So that's going to be included in that starter pack. It's called the Lepide Launch Pack. And essentially, it's all the training and support one would need to get through the install, the config, and then ultimately administrative training.
Great. Well, I think that's it for questions. I really appreciate it, Josh and Danny, for the presentation, demonstration. And if there are no more questions, I'm going to conclude our session today. I hope everyone enjoyed the webinar. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thanks, everyone. Cheers.